one of the goals in life should be to find something that you love doing and then figuring out how to create a career doing it. Because if you do that, your personal health is better, your personal relationships are better.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, I sit down with Gene Bryce, a nationally recognized executive recruiter, speaker, and author who has made it his mission to inspire the leaders of tomorrow to focus on making impacts far beyond the boardroom, and that in order to grow to the greatest heights professionally, we must be ready to prioritize what matters most personally. Okay, and welcome back into the most recent installment of the Growth Ready podcast. And I'm so excited to be welcoming in a gentleman who joined us almost 3 years ago on our previous installment of the show when we were called Career Competitor. And I'm so excited to be welcoming Gene Bryce back to the show because when we talk about growth and when we talk about the work that goes into the readiness around growth, I'm just really excited to be able to ask you a few questions from different perspectives today, Gene. But like I do with everybody now on the show, before we get started, Gene, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
You know, it's a great question, Steve. And I'm just going to give you a little background before I answer it. But, you know, my background was very eclectic, meaning I started off, my first career was managing and then owning rock and roll clubs in New York, right? I went from there. I proposed to my wife and she wouldn't marry me unless I got out of that business and got a real job. So I went and took a sales job with a division of an international Fortune 100 firm, Alcatel. And very quickly I went from sales. Within 13 months, I was promoted to take over the first sales team that was really struggling. From there, 18 months later, I was given my first general management position and moved for the first time in my family to take over the New Jersey location. Then they promoted me to district manager running Delaware, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And then my last position with them is I was in charge for Alcatel of all East Coast operations. I had about 1,500 people reporting into me from sales, operations, service, administration. I left that and I was being paid very well, but I left that because I was on an airplane every single day. I was traveling. I was in a different city. Some days I was in 2 cities on the same day. I went into executive search. I opened my own executive search firm with my number one GM. I took him as my partner because I had used a lot of the search firms to hire my staff at Alcatel. I thought I could bring some value to it. The firm grew over 10 years, double-digit growth, 10 years in a row. 1 year out of the blue, 1 month, we must have hit a certain revenue number. All these companies came trying to acquire my firm. I sold it to a multi-billion-dollar company out of Michigan. I reacquired it back 3 years later, and then I grew it again. And my son and my son-in-law now run it, and I'm a chairman, and I'll be going in today to work with their 4 college interns this summer. But I share this with you because I've placed over 1,000 C-level executives in positions. I've interviewed tens of thousands. My firm has placed tens of thousands. And I want you to know, I believe every time in my career that growth has really happened, there was purpose and passion in what I was doing. Okay. And I think where a lot of executives struggle, Steve, is they don't have clarity on what brings them that purpose and passion. And I'm going to share some things with you, you know. In the U.S. today, divorce rates are over 50%. Obesity in our country is off the charts. We have over $1.6 trillion in college loans. 36% of adult children live at home with their parents still. Credit card debt is in trillions. And I believe that comes down to one of the most important goals that an individual should have in their life. That comes down to people being in jobs they don't enjoy. I believe one of the goals in life should be to find something that you love doing and then figuring out how to create a career doing it. Because if you do that, okay, if you can do that, my personal experience is your personal health is better, your personal relationships are better. Okay, the glass isn't half full, it can be overflowing. The conference board came out with a survey a couple of years ago. They interviewed 2,000 C-level executives in their 50s and 60s. And they asked them one question. Now, these are probably 6-figure, 7-figure executives. Do you have job satisfaction in what you do? 57% said they did not. So what does that mean, Steve? That means you have people waking up every day going to do something for a paycheck, right? And the executives that I know that have driven the most growth are the ones that have clarity in what gives them passion and purpose. They love what they're doing. I could show you resumes of some of the senior executives that I've placed, and if you look at the resume, you say, oh my God, what a successful executive. Well, if you knew him personally like I did, a lot of them are on their third marriage. They're never home for the Little League game. They missed the child's recital, and they're not very happy in life. And those are the ones I believe that move from job to job. So I believe, to answer your question, growth in my life and what I know from the people that I have placed in executive search, you need to have passion and purpose. You need to have something that you wake up every morning and you're excited about doing. And you need to have clarity around what gives you that. So it's a long way of answering your question, but
I love it. I really appreciate just how quickly you were able to cover about a 45 year career and give everybody that context of just understanding the way in which you were answering the question. You could have easily gone right there to the part at the end and just explained that. And what the context is it justifies why you were answering it the way you were. But at the same time, something that I'm also hearing, Gene, which I think I'd really love to go towards now, is that really an executive, a key leader, someone who has decided that they are going to be in that influential role in life, the first part of the readiness conversation when it says, okay, hey, I'm going to go in this direction with my career, with my business, respectfully, whatever it may be. In order for me to be ready to go in that direction, there are 2 or 3, as you've just alluded to, key principles that if I don't get these in check, any form of growth, or however I look at growth, is going to be immediately reduced. There's no way I can optimize that growth if I'm not getting these 2 or 3 things in order. And from what I'm hearing, almost immediately, you don't want to learn the lesson. I'm hearing that you've had so many folks that have learned the lesson the hard way, and here you are saying, like, don't wait to learn the lesson. Get that stuff in order right now.
Yeah, and when I talk to, I do a lot of speaking to the young people, the college kids, and I really spend a lot of time talking to them about, listen, there was a study recently, right, where they went in and they spoke and interviewed a number of hospice workers, people that have dedicated their lives, right, to working with people that are dying at the end of their lives. And they said to them, do you have any experience? The people that you're working with, do they have any regrets? And you know what the number one regret that came back, Steve? The number one regret is people on their deathbed saying, I wish I had lived my dreams, not someone else's dreams. Right? Now think about that. At the end of your life, that's your biggest regret. So what I try to talk to young people about is, first of all, are there things you're passionate about? And then how do you find out if that passion is real? I say, I don't want you to go major in anything in college until you have some hands-on experience. I absolutely don't want you to go do something without having, hands-on experience. And I talk to them about how to get internships, free internships. And I take them through a process to do that. Even if it's only 1 day a week, go in and have some hands-on experience on what you feel you want to dedicate your life to before you dedicate your life to it. Before you take 6 figures in college loans, make sure that dream is your dream, not someone else who's pushing you. Now, they got to have a plan B, Steve, but if they can find that, right? So in my career, executive search, I will tell you, I wish I had made the decision, I'm going to open an executive search firm because it's going to give me purpose and passion. Honestly, I did it because I needed to get off the road. I had a young family like you do now. I was never home at night. But why I stayed in that business for 30 years, Steve, is I woke up every day and I was passionate. I had a very big firm, one of the biggest executive search firms in the US. I never stopped working with the clients and the executives because what gave me purpose was putting that marriage together, helping companies hire the executive that would drive their growth, but also making sure that executive and that family, that this was really the right match for them. Because more than half of them, I had to pick up the family from one city and move them to another if they're going to be the CEO, you know? So I got great satisfaction out of that. It gave me purpose, and I was excited to go and do what I did every single day.
I really, really appreciate the acknowledgement of it wasn't necessarily why you started the business, but it was sure as heck why you stayed in and that made it what it became.
Yeah.
And I'm curious when you look at that. And last time you were on the show, we talked about your book From Grad to Grown Up, and that was a big part of the conversation last time. And I want to be able to use some of this consistent work. I follow you on social media. I see the sort of ways in which you're supporting these up and coming younger folks that are getting into the workplace. And for me, it's so admirable. It's so necessary at a time when, you know, hearing from your experience is so much more effective than the access, let's say, to all these different platforms where these kids could be getting information from. They don't know what to read, why to read it, how to read it, all this kind of thing. And when they have someone like yourself, boots on the ground, you've lived it, you've experienced it, you understand it, to have that voice is just so powerful. And it is work I admire so much. But really what I want to see if you can help us here with is, how does a person get clearer? Like you said, you want to get some of that experience on the job front. You want to do some of this, some of that to establish where my passion could potentially be. But let's say there's that person right now who has committed to a path and they're maybe 5 years into it. And I know you're all too familiar with that, what that person looks like. And when they come to you and the sort of things that they say, what might your insight be to help that person say, I don't feel this passion and this purpose, Gene, that you're telling me that I should feel right now? Where do they maybe make that pivot, or how do they maybe make that pivot at this juncture in their career?
Sure. Let me share with you. First of all, I would ask them some questions. I would ask them some questions like, okay, you've been there for 5 years. Tell me when you've been the happiest in your career and what was going on that made you feel that way. Okay. Number two, tell me the things that you enjoy about what you're doing right now. You've been there for 5 years, so there has to be some parts of it that you enjoy. Okay. If I made you the CEO tomorrow, what would you change about your position? What changes would you do? All right. Now here's the $1 million question. If I gave you a magic wand, Steve, and I said, you can create the ideal next job for you at this time in your career, besides being an Olympic gold medalist in swimming, all right? What would you create for yourself? Tell me the role. Tell me what you'd be doing every day. Tell me the culture that you work best in. Tell me what your immediate boss would be like, okay? I take them through some of those questions to get them to think a little bit about it. And then on top of that, then we talk a little bit about, tell me about your foundation. What's important to you in your life? You know, what would you go to war over? You know, what do you really believe in, right? And then from there, let's put some hands-on experience. If there's something you think you really want to do, let's figure out, you have to pay your bills, but let's figure out how you might be able to get some experience around that to see if it really is that real for you. And I would take them through, I want to give you a process. Let me tell you a story and it might help you put it all together, Steve. As you know, I have a charity that my wife and I started, the Plant a Seed, Inspire a Dream Foundation. And this other charity came to me and they knew about my background. And they said to me, this charity was all about helping foster kids get into college. And then if the young person was graduating from college, but they had a hard time getting that first job, they would reach out to some business leaders to see if they could give this, this person some advice. So I get a call from this charity And they said to me, Gene, would you spend some time with him? It's a great kid. He's having a hard time. Now, I got to tell you, when I was doing executive search every day, Steve, I would get every single week between 80 and 120 resumes sent to me. Now, you have to understand, I was on a couple of these lists of top executive recruiters in the world. The way executive search works is you specialize in a vertical market. You become the person that they go to, but it's in one specific vertical market. So my firm was the largest in management consulting and education technology. If you were an executive coming from those fields, we put the senior partner into McKinsey, the senior partner into Deloitte. We did all these positions. We could add value. But most of these 120 resumes were from, you could be the CEO of the biggest medical device company in the world. You could be the CEO of Procter & Gamble. That's not the world we played in. I can't help you. I'd have one of my assistants going through that. I couldn't even respond. However, once or twice a year, Steve, I would get an email from a young person saying, I have a passion for executive search, or I have a passion for human resources. And I've done some research, and I know you're a thought leader in that industry. Would you spend a couple of minutes with me and give me some guidance? Now, I always responded to that email, Steve. You know why? I'd want someone to respond to my own kids' email if they sent that. And I've asked a lot of the senior executives I know, CEOs of big firms, they would respond to it. So go back to the story. This young man coming out of Temple University, I spoke to him. So the first question I asked him, what's your major? He said, sports management. I said, oh no, sports management. He goes, why are you having that reaction? I said, because it's very hard to break into, right? Very hard to break into it. And what most people don't realize is the ones that do break in, a lot of them have a hook. They know somebody that brings them in. I said, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. How passionate are you about this sports management? Because why do you ask? I said, because if we go on this journey together and we get lucky, you're going to end up working for a single A baseball team in Des Moines, Iowa. Are you willing to pick up from Philadelphia and move to Des Moines, Iowa? He goes, I'll go anywhere. I said, great. I said, here's the second question. We may go on this journey and we may strike out. I need to know before we go on this journey what your plan B is. What would you be willing to do if we can't break in? And he thought about it and he came back to me. He goes, I would go into sales. I said, well, there's a lot more sales jobs. I said, what have you done so far? Let's talk. What have you done so far? And he goes, I've sent my resume to the Philadelphia Eagles, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Phillies, the 76ers. And I said, so what's happening? He goes, no one's gotten back to me. I said, well, let me tell you the first rule of thumb. If any of those franchises are looking for someone who has absolutely no experience, they're going to reach out to you than the other 1,000 resumes they got. You will never, ever break in that way. I said, I'm going to do something with it. I said, I'm going to need you to do some work. I want you, we'll start within a 50-mile radius of Philadelphia. Once we strike out there, then we're going to expand in 250-mile radiuses. We'll start with the major franchises, then we'll go down to AAA, AA, and if we get lucky, you'll be in Des Moines, Iowa, working for a single A baseball team. I said, let's start with those 4 franchises. I want you to identify every C-level executive within those firms. And I'm going to help you write an email. You do the research. I'm going to tell you how to get their emails. Here's the email I want you to write. I am passionate about the sports management industry. I've done some research. I know you're a thought leader in that industry. Will you give me a few minutes to give me some guidance? He sends it out. He calls me 2 days later. And he goes, I got a reply from the chief marketing officer of the Philadelphia 76ers. He has some time on Friday to speak to me. He says, he'll give me 30 minutes. I said, great. Now, let's prepare for those 30 minutes. You have to know how to enter that conversation, how to start it, the questions to ask, and how to end it. So I helped him prepare for it. I said, after the call, give me a call. Let me know how it goes. So he calls me after the call. I said, how'd it go? I think it went great. He said, why do you think it went great? He's invited me in to meet 3 people on Tuesday. I'm like, wait a second. If he invited you in to meet 3 people on Tuesday, there's a job. So now I got to prepare you for how to interview professionally so you can win this job. And that's the second thing I talk to young people about. The colleges don't do a good job on this. The other goal in life should be to become a grandmaster of interviewing, because when you find that job you really want, right, you're going to be interviewing against other people. The grandmaster is the one who gets offered the job and gets paid higher. So I helped him prepare for it. The end of the story is they hired him in the corporate sales department. He got his foot in the door. I think now he's the manager of corporate sales for the LA Kings hockey team. But it was a process of helping him find a way to break in. So hopefully that answers the question you asked me about someone at 5 years. That's maybe a little bit of a direction they could go in.
Well, it's more than, for me, it's more than maybe. When you think about the essence of that story, is at the heart of it is like, what are you willing to do to get your foot in the door? And so many of us want that silver bullet that's going to give us that perfect job from the very outset, and the likelihood of that actually happening, as you know in your experience, is slim to none. And if we're all waiting for that perfect job to come first, we're probably going to be waiting a long time. And as you alluded to there, it's like, what parts of that essence, like if you could picture that ideal position down the road and create that for yourself, what is there anything within that right now that you can find at least some essence of in a different role and get yourself on a ladder that you would rather be climbing, as opposed to be halfway up one that you obviously don't want to be on? And I think something that is so important here as well, as I'm listening to you talk through this, is like, and I always want to highlight this on the show when I hear it, like, people, this is work. Like you're saying it, like, this is work. And that's what passion and purpose does, is it makes us look at work very differently. Right. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from this story.
Well, listen, I know a young man that used to help me coach this high-level AAU team that he wanted to go into college coaching. First year, he got a chance to come in and be a manager of operations at Rider University, but they didn't pay him. They said, I have a basketball camp, you can get some money there. But by doing that first year, they hired him when the job opened up. If the passion is that strong. But I'm going to go a step further. Let me give you an example. I had a couple of, we have these interns that come in, right? And every summer we bring in 4 college interns going into their senior year. For 25 plus years, I would always, if they're coming into my office, I felt it was my responsibility to spend some time with them. I'm going in today. This is the first week. I'm going to talk to the 4 college interns. But I can't tell you, Steve, how many of them, they went on to be doctors. They went on to be lawyers. They went on to be accountants, engineers. One guy went on to be an NBA basketball player. But I can't tell you how many of them come back to me 2 or 3 years later and they hate what they're doing. I'm going to give you a story of 2 that became lawyers. They went to 2 of the best law schools in America. One went to Boston College, one went to NYU. They both graduated in the top 25% of their graduating class. They both got hired by big law firms. 2 years into doing it, they absolutely hated what they were doing. They had no hands-on experience. I think a lot of young people that go into law, maybe a family member pushes them that way. They think it's like Law and Order. They're going to be in the courtroom every day, right? So my daughter, who went to Lehigh, was very bright. She said, Dad, I think I want to go to law school. I said, whoa, time out. I said, before you do that, I really want you to have some experience. So I helped her write that email. And I said, send it out to all the law firms around where we live, and maybe they'll bring you in. And the key word, she reached out and said, listen, I'm passionate about this. I was wondering if I can come in and work for free this summer. The key word is free. So this local law firm brought her in 4 days a week. And I'm really grateful to the partner because he exposed her to everything involved with being a lawyer, the research, the admin. Took her into a courtroom three times that summer. Well, the end of the story is, at the end of that, she said, I don't want to be a lawyer. And I was very happy because I was going to pay a lot of that law school. She didn't want it. She goes, I always had a passion for being a teacher. But she was graduating from Lehigh with a 3.92 GPA. All of her friends were going into investment banking, private equity, management consulting. She thought it would be below her. I said, Courtney, just go find, if you have a passion for this, go do it. Do it. And I got to tell you, she's a high school English teacher. And when she's in that classroom, Steve, she is the happiest person on earth. Now, could she have made more money the other way? She's making a good living. Her husband makes a good living, and she's happy, which I think is one of the keys, you know?
Mm. Yes, it is. And I think that is the crucial component there for me is the value that a person wants to put on their happiness. And you know, and that going back to how you answered the initial question, it's like, okay, if we get so focused on the idea of the job, the idea of the career, and the idea of growth, like, oh, growth looks like this, and because I will get all this growth in my career and in life, it will provide me all of this, which is maybe some of these tangible components, my fortune, the way of life, all this kind of stuff. But our careers, our businesses, whatever path we choose for ourselves, that's where we're dedicating so much time and so much energy. And if the return on that is only tangible and we can't find some of these true emotional anchors,
Bingo.
that is so, it's so apparent in all these stories that you're telling, is that the winning factor in all of these stories is an emotional return, is some form of an emotional return, right?
And if you could find that passion, and it could be your own business. Like I was mentoring this young lady. She's University of Pennsylvania, unbelievable student. Business, the business school, Wharton. But she said to me, I always wanted to go into acting, but my parents said, you'll never make a career in acting. Well, my attitude is, listen, you keep going to Wharton, but don't give up that dream. Why not you? Why not you? You give everything you can to that. All right. You got to have a plan B, but why not you? You know, I have a young man who, you know, he has a lawn cutting business. The happiest guy in the world, you know? Like I asked my landscaper, you know, what do you do for a living? I cut lawns. You ask this young man I'm mentoring, what do you do for a living? I make the world beautiful, right? I make the world beautiful. And that passion comes across to his clients, right? And the work that he does. And he's happy. You know, he's happy. He's established a business. He's making good living. And that's what I want. I want to see that with everyone. I don't want the people that I mentor or I come in contact with. I don't want a young person being that person in hospice on their deathbed saying, I wish I had followed my dreams, not someone else's dreams. To me, that's a sad life, Steve, you know? And I just don't think young people hear that enough. Now, the hard thing is that a lot of people start their careers and they're unhappy, like those two lawyers. How do you shift? Like you said, they got to have a plan. They got to be a little bit open to risk, you know? But there's a way of doing that where you don't have to give up the living until you're able to establish. Like I went into executive search. I was, I'm making, a very good living. I didn't really commit 100% until I made a deal with the CEO of Alcatel and said, I know how much you spent on recruiting last year. I want to do that for you, and no one can sell the company better than us. And I'll give you a little discount, but I want to do all of that recruiting. And every first of the month, we got this big retainer that paid all the bills and gave us the ability to build a really successful business without having to, take that giant leap, right? There's ways you can think about it before you do it.
Yep. Yeah. And it's such a important insight to provide for anyone considering that shift or making that pivot within their careers. But I also want to make sure that we're covering the folks that already are in a position of purpose and passion. And we do have a lot of folks that listen to this show that very much are cut from that cloth. Like, I'm already doing something with purpose and passion. Like, right. And one thing I want to really get from you here is, even with that purpose and with that passion, if we take it for granted, we can sometimes forget how we built it in the first place. Like some of that work as we're alluding to here. So I'm just curious, when you think about the longevity of your career that you've had, and you think about how long you were working there, 30 plus years within the same organization, feeling that purpose, feeling that passion for the work that you did more and more so, how did you keep that coming? What were some maybe intentional acts or some some daily rituals that you maybe had when you think about how I maintained, as you said it before, my glass was overflowing. Like, there's more to it than just simply that happening organically. I know the kind of work that comes into simply maintaining that as well.
Yeah. And Steve, that's a great question. And let me share with you. I'm going to share you my own experience, but even the senior executives that I place that are super, super successful, all of them have figured out this component, right? I don't know if you know or your audience knows if they've ever heard the term a linchpin, what a linchpin is, right? Linchpin is a little pin that keeps a wheel in place, right? That pin falls out, the wheel collapses and everything collapses. For myself personally and the executives that I know that are most successful, what I identified, what were the things every day and every week that I needed to do so the pin didn't fall out, right? And I know if I exercised every day, if I got some time to meditate, if I had family time, if I could read, right? Do a little reading and continue. I'm a big believer in continuous learning. If I did those things on a weekly basis and I ate right, that pin stayed in place. And I was able to go in with the same passion, the same drive, and the same energy to do the things that I knew I needed to do to move my company forward.
I love that. And the idea of I love these examples like the linchpin, because immediately my mind goes to that's how you keep the pin in. And it also immediately levels up the appreciation that you have to ensure that that pin doesn't come out. You know, like, again, like this notion of exercise, meditation, family, reading, these are key components for you that allowed that pin to stay in. But it shows anybody listening to this goes, I know how easy it is to take a day off exercise and to take a day off, a week off reading. I know how easy it is for me to get caught up in my work and neglect my family for a day or two, whatever it may be. It's that easy to fall into that. And what you're saying here that I think is so important, especially when you look at this from these folks in these positions of influence, in CEOs, whoever it may be, leaders within these organizations, is that if we're not giving it that daily, intentional, and very deliberate attention, it's just like all of a sudden we realize how quickly that pin can come it can come out. How easily that pin can come out. And I think for me listening to that, that's what I'm hearing, is that it's not as much about what are those things to put the pin in. It's how easy it is for those things to get brushed to one side and for that pin to very quickly fall out.
And the times in my career, and I'll tell you, at the end of Alcatel, when I was doing all that traveling, the times that I struggled the most where I wasn't focusing on those things as much as I needed to focus on them. When I got clarity around that, Steve, not only did my company do better, I did better as an individual, and that's the key component. So,
yeah, so much of what you've done throughout your career, Gene, you've had a very outward perspective from what I'm hearing, in terms of just when you think about the amount of people working within your firm at certain times, especially the work that you're doing now with your charities. Like, how can we do these things in a ways that impact other people? I'm curious, like, how have you been able to prioritize yourself when you think about some of these things that we've talked about here today? Like, there's clearly this acknowledgement that a lot of this work starts from within. But how have you been able to actually rationalize that I need to be the priority in order for all these other things to, be in the place that they need to be in?
Well, one of the things that I realized a long time ago, Steve, if I'm not doing well and I'm not taking care of Gene, I'm not much help to anyone else. So I have structure in my day. I'm spiritual. I will read first thing in the morning. Right? I'm going to exercise in the morning, right? I am going to meditate sometime in the afternoon, right? I am going to have family time every single day. But if I have structure and I follow that, and even in my corporate career, I was the turnaround guy. They would send me into an office, Alcatel, that was underperforming. And I would go in, and my job was to turn it around. And I did that 4 or 5 times. And it was always the same process. I would go in, and as an executive, I went in and first of all, here's my background. So you understand I'm here to help. But then let's identify, first of all, especially with a sales team, right? The one way to get a sales team to support you is to come in. What I would do, the first thing, I would bring every sales manager in and every sales rep. Tell me about your prospect list. Okay, take me through each one. And then I would identify the ones that were real. And I'd say, okay, I want to go on this one. I want you to schedule a client point here, make an appointment here with this one. I was able to quickly understand what ones had high probability for closing. And by going now with them, taking them with me, and bringing back business, which put money in their pocket, it immediately changed the culture and got them to be supportive of me. Revenue drove everything in business, just like it did in my business. And then from there, you could go to operations. Then you could work on that piece of it. But first, you had to take care of the revenue piece and drive the revenue piece. If that was there, then the other pieces would fall in line if you had good leadership, So that was important for me. And setting very clear expectations. I would always set very clear expectations,
Yeah. And I think anyone listen to this, I'm hoping they're hearing, like, you've found a way over the years to put a value on being of service and being of value to other people. And it's easy to almost look at it as from one side or the other, like, how do I get my team to operate well? How do I get myself to operate well? But something about that being of value to other people, it's the bridge between the two. It's like, how can I think about how I'm investing in myself? And through those investments, that's when the value is built. And suddenly now I'm impacting other people. And again, bringing it back to what we're all about on this show, very little individual growth can happen without support of others, and very little team growth can happen without true support from a leader that is investing in themselves. So it's a reciprocal relationship. Like that's really how growth works. And so much of your story and these insights today, Gene, I just hear that in abundance, right?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, my job as a leader was to make my people better. And that came, it has to be real, right? If you really care about them, especially I would hire a new person. I would tell them, we put them through a very extensive behavior-based interview. We bring them on board. We have an obligation to make this person successful, or else we failed, So what are we going to do? And how are we going to help this person be successful, And I would always one very simple thing. And I taught all my managers this, right? The first of every month, I would sit down with my direct reports, and they knew coming into that meeting, it was a month-end review. I want you have to give me 5 goals that you are committing to that you will accomplish this month. Now, I might guide them into 1 or 2. You need some work here, you need some work here. And every single month they would come in and tell me how they did. And if they missed one, they had to have a reason why they missed that goal, right? You don't want to carry that over. And I would attach a little bonus to each one of those goals. But something very simple like that to bring them in. They knew that once a month you're going to sit down with them and talk about those goals, right? It made a difference. There's things you can do to really make that difference. And to talk about, you mentioned my charity, and I just want to share that for everybody. My wife and I started the charity in 2008, and it was based on the fact that we had 4 children, and 3 of my children found things that they were passionate about as kids and teenagers. And those 3 things, my daughter was into acting, my son was a basketball player, my youngest daughter was a volleyball player. Now, what did those passions do for young people? First of all, it connected them to like-minded kids, so friendships developed. It gave them positive role models in their life, the coach, the music teacher, the acting teacher, right? It built their self-esteem. My one daughter never found that thing, and she's the one that struggled the most. So the charity was based on, my son got married 2 years ago, Steve. 3 of his ushers and his best men were young men he played travel and AAU basketball with from 4th grade to 12th grade, right? One daughter struggled, never found her thing. My wife and I, families go through highs and lows financial. We never wanted a family that's struggling financially, that has a young person that's passionate about something. It can be karate, it can be swimming, coding. I don't care what it is. We don't want them not to have the same opportunities to pursue those passions. So then we step in, we interview the family and the young person. We start off with an annual scholarship. We check with them every single month with the mentor, the teacher, the young person. How is it working? How's it going? Right? After the first year, we bring them back. We'll renew it. And we've helped 867 kids so far pursue their passions, and we've had some great, one really quick story. We had a young man come in 4th grade, very small young man who was being picked on. He wanted to take karate lessons, so we found them. The whole trick is finding the right mentor or sensei that will connect with the kid and buys into the belief of the charity. We found him a karate studio and a sensei 2 blocks from where he lived. He went in and he did karate 4 days a week. At 15 years old last year, he was a 2nd degree black belt. He couldn't become more than a 2nd degree until he turned 16. But when he turned 16, the sensei calls us and says, "You don't need to pay for him anymore. He's now my assistant and he's training other kids." So when I saw him, I said, "I guess you're not being picked on anymore." He goes, "Nah, no one bullies me anymore." So we have so many of those experiences. And then you mentioned the book, Steve, Grad the Grown Up. It's Amazon. It's an Amazon bestseller. It's $19. It's 68 small chapters, a lot of them covering the things we talked about tonight. But any of the money or proceeds from that goes to the charity to help more kids. So
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful work, Gene, and I'm so. One thing I was so excited about with us revisiting 3 years on from when we last spoke was just hearing about how these missions of yours continue to grow, and hearing these kind of insights and these stories is so powerful. And I hope that through our listeners, maybe we can start helping you inch up closer and closer to that 1,000 kids. You're only about 130 something away by the sounds of it. So
well, someone hears this broadcast and they have a family that's struggling, what we hate hearing is, someone's into dance and the father lost a job and they can't afford it. No, that's what, come to us, and that passion's real. We'll support you.
I love it. And hey, if that's not you, and I know people, so if it's someone it's on you now to be that connector between you and potentially Gene and his foundation. Gene, I knew this wouldn't disappoint. I knew revisiting with you was completely worth it, and I'm so excited that we've been able to do that and just reframe some of the content that you provided the first time through this lens of growth, but also just provide some new insights, new stories that really help our listeners continue on their own growth journey. And so just appreciate you, brother. You're just an absolute wealth of knowledge, generosity of insight, and just best of luck with all your endeavors going on at the moment, brother.
And I'm happy, Steve, that you and I are still going to the same barber,
That's right. It's a cheap barber. He's not getting a lot of business, quite frankly, in terms of what we pay him. But hey, it's a look that I'm stuck with, and I'm comfortable with it.
I'm right there with you, my friend. All right, I'm right there with you. Listen, I really enjoyed talking to you. If I can do anything to help you, just let me know. All right.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Gene.
Take care of yourself. All right. Bye-bye.
And my thanks again to Gene for joining us on this episode of Growth Ready. And something that he mentioned in our conversation, he used this term linchpin. And it immediately got me thinking. I was like, gosh, Steve, what is your linchpin? What is that thing or what are those things, as Gene mentioned, is a number of things sometimes. What are those things in my life that ensure that the wheel stays on? So for the momentum, for my routine, for growth to be consistent, what might those items that I know I need to address daily look like for me to maintain that linchpin in the wheel so that the wheels don't come off? I'm curious, could you list yours right now? Would you need some time to think about that? You might have noticed how quickly Gene was able just to label those that he has within his life, such as exercise, meditation, family, reading. These are essential pieces for him. These are pillars, foundations that ensure that linchpin of his stays rock solid, firm in that wheel to keep the momentum of his life on the tracks. So what is your linchpin? What are those 3 or 4 items potentially in your life that you know, if I don't prioritize these parts of me, these parts of my life, then that linchpin will come loose. Those wheels will fall off. And who knows what may come from that point. So start asking yourself, what is my linchpin? What are those pillars, those ingredients that make up my linchpin? And how am I ensuring that it's enough of a priority where that linchpin is not vulnerable to coming out of the wheel at any point and potentially derailing my growth and my life for that matter? So again, my thanks to Gene for joining us for the second time on the show, and my thanks to you as always for being a listener of Growth Ready. For me, it's important to always mention that you should be subscribed to the show. Why would you hope to hear about the show when you can know that you're going to receive the show? So go ahead and press that subscribe button. Take the time to share the show with someone and be sure to leave us a rating, especially those of you listening to us on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and click that 5th star because you know we are worthy of it. In the meantime, folks, best of luck with anything and everything you have going on in your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.